Book of Heaven, Volume 21, Part 6. April 14th, 1927. How our Lord came upon earth to suffer all the evils that the human will had done. How the word of Jesus is life. I was thinking about the divine will and the evil of the human will, and my beloved Jesus, all afflicted, told me, "My daughter, everything I suffered in my humanity was nothing other than all the evil that the human will had produced for the poor creature. It formed her prison. It took away from her the freedom of being able to move around within her God, in the heavens, wherever she wanted. It rendered her incapable of doing good. It took light away from her and surrounded her with thick darkness. And I came upon earth and enclosed myself in the prison of the womb of my dear mamma. And even though that prison was holy, it cannot be denied that it was the most narrow and dark prison that could exist in the world. So much so that I could not even stretch out a hand or a foot. It was not given to me to take one step, nor was there any room even to open my eyes. The human will had done all this to the creatures, and I, from the very beginning of my conception, came to suffer this pain in order to knock down the prison of the human will and give back to man what he had lost. I wanted to be born in a stable and suffer the most extreme poverty. The human will had formed something worse than a stable for the poor creatures, while passions had formed manure in their souls, and blowing more than wind, it had rendered them numb with intense cold, to the point of affecting their nature, not only taking terrestrial happiness away from them, but making them experience hunger and poverty, not only of the soul, but also of the body. And I wanted to suffer intense cold, extreme poverty, and the stench of the manure that was in the stable. And in seeing two animals near me, I had the sorrow that the human will had converted our most beautiful work, our dear jewel, our dear image, the poor man, almost into a beast. There was not one pain that I suffered that did not have its origin in the human will, and I subjected myself to everything in order to rehabilitate it once again in the kingdom of the supreme Fiat. Even in my passion, I wanted to suffer being stripped in the scourging, denuded on the cross, and stretched in such a horrible way that my bones could be counted amid confusion, abandonment, and unspeakable bitterness. All this was nothing other than the outpouring of the human will that had stripped man of all goods, and with its poisonous breath had covered him with confusion and opprobrium to the point of transforming him in a horrible way, and of rendering him an object of mockery for his many enemies. Daughter, if you want to know all the evils that the human will has done, study my life well. Number my pains, one by one, and you will read the black characters of the noxious story of the human will. You will feel such horror in reading it that you will be content with dying rather than letting one single syllable of it enter into you. After this, Jesus kept silent and remained all taciturn, pensive, and afflicted. He looked around and far away, as if he wanted to investigate the dispositions of creatures. And not seeing them disposed, he remained in his profound silence. So I had to go through several days of privation, as if he were no longer living in me. Then I began to feel him move in my interior, like rising sun. And he said to me, "My daughter, whenever I speak, a life comes out of me, the greatest gift. And I must see whether there is disposition on the part of creatures, so as to place this life of mine in them. And not seeing it, I am forced to remain silent, because there is no place in which to put this great gift. This is the reason why many times I do not speak. In fact, what regards my divine fiat is not only for you, but will serve other creatures. At most, it forms its capital in you, in order to transmit it for the good of others. So, while I keep silent, you pray that the kingdom of my will be known. And you suffer because you see yourself without me, your life. To live without life is the greatest martyrdom. These pains and these prayers mature the gift. And while they make me open my mouth to issue the new life that regards my divine will, they dispose creatures to receive it. These pains are more than sun's rays that mature the fields, the fruits, the flowers. Therefore, everything is necessary: silence, pains, prayers, for the decorum of the manifestations of my will. April 16th, 1927. How our Lord made the deposit of his sacramental life in the heart of the Most Holy Virgin. The great good that a life animated by the divine will can do. How, in her sorrows, the Most Holy Virgin found the secret of her strength in the divine will. I was doing the hour in which Jesus instituted the Most Holy Eucharist, and Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, "My daughter, when I do an act, first I look to see whether there is at least one creature in whom to place the deposit of my act, so that she may take the good I do, and keep it safe and well defended. Now, when I instituted the Most Holy Sacrament, I looked for this creature, and my Queen Mamma offered herself to receive this act of mine and the deposit of this great gift, saying to me, "My son, just as I offered you my womb and my whole being in your conception to keep you safe and defended, I now offer you my maternal heart in order to receive this great deposit. And I line up around your sacramental life my affections, my heartbeats, my love, my thoughts, all of myself to keep you defended, surrounded by cortege, loved, protected. I myself take on the commitment to repay you for the great gift you are giving. Trust your mamma, and I will take care of the defense of your sacramental life. And since you yourself have constituted me queen of all creation, I have the right to line up around you all the light of the sun as homage and adoration. The stars, the heavens, the sea, all the inhabitants of the air, I place everything around you to give you love and glory. Now, ensuring a place for myself in which to put this great deposit of my sacramental life, and trusting my mamma, who had given me all the proofs of her faithfulness, I instituted the most holy sacrament. She was the only worthy creature who could keep, defend, and protect my act. See then, when creatures receive me, I descend into them, together with the acts of my inseparable mamma. And only because of this can I perpetuate my sacramental life. Therefore, whenever I want to do a great work worthy of me, it is necessary that I first choose one creature. First, in order to have a place in which to put my gift. Second, to be repaid for it. They do the same also in the natural order. If a farmer wants to sow a seed, he does not throw it in the middle of the street, but he goes in search of a little field. First, he works it. He forms the furrow, and then he sows the seed in it. And to keep it safe, he covers it with earth, anxiously waiting for the harvest, in order to be repaid for his work and for the seed that he entrusted to the earth. Someone else wants to form a beautiful object. First, he prepares the raw materials, the place in which to put it, and then he forms it. So I have done for you. I chose you. I prepared you. And then I entrusted to you the great gift of the manifestations of my will. And just as I entrusted the destiny of my sacramental life to my beloved mother, in the same way, I wanted to trust you, entrusting to you the destiny of the kingdom of my will. Then I continued to think about all that my beloved good had done and suffered during the course of his life. And he added, "My daughter, my life down here was extremely short, and I spent most of it hidden. But even though it was so very short, since my humanity was animated by a divine will, how many goods did I not do? The whole church takes from my life, drinking her fill at the font of my doctrine. Each word of mine is a fountain placed at the mouth of each Christian. Each one of my examples is more than sun that illuminates, warms, fecundates, and makes the greatest sanctities mature. If one wanted to compare all the saints, all the good, all of their pains and their heroism, placed before my very short life, they would always be tiny little flames before the great sun. And since the divine will reigned in me, all the pains, the humiliations, confusions, contrasts, accusations that the enemies gave me during the course of my life and of my passion, everything served to their own humiliation and to their own greater confusion. In fact, since a divine will was in me, it happened with me as with the sun, when the clouds, extending through the lower air, seemed to want to give a front to the sun by obscuring the surface of the earth, covering momentarily the vividness of the solar light. But the sun laughs at the clouds because they cannot have perennial life in the air. Their life is fleeting. A small wind is enough to make them dissolve, while the sun is always triumphant in its fullness of light that dominates and fills the whole earth. The same happened with me. Everything that my enemies did to me, and even my very death, were like many clouds that covered my humanity. But the sun of my divinity they could not touch, and as soon as the wind of the power of my divine will moved, the clouds dissolved, and more than sun, I rose again, glorious and triumphant, leaving the enemies more humiliated than before. My daughter, in the soul in whom my will reigns with all its fullness, minutes of life are centuries, and centuries of fullness of all goods, while wherever it does not reign, centuries of life are only minutes of goods that they contain. And if the soul in whom my will reigns should suffer humiliations, contrasts, and pains, these are like clouds that the wind of the divine Fiat unloads over those who, to their own humiliation, have dared to touch the bearer of my eternal volition. After this, I was thinking about the sorrow of my mamma, when sorrowful and pierced in her heart, she departed from Jesus, leaving him dead in the sepulchre. And I thought to myself, how can it be possible that she had so much strength as to be able to leave him? It is true that he was dead, but it was always the body of Jesus. How could her maternal love not consume her, rather than letting her take one step alone away from that extinguished body? Yet she left him. What heroism! What strength! But while I was thinking of this, my sweet Jesus moved in my interior and told me, "My daughter, do you want to know how my mamma had the strength to leave me? All the secret of her strength was in my will reigning in her. She lived of a will that was divine, not human, and therefore she contained the immeasurable strength. Even more, you must know that when my pierced mamma left me in the sepulchre, my will kept her immersed within two immense seas, one of sorrow and another more extensive of joys and beatitudes. And while that of sorrow gave her all the martyrdoms, that of joy gave her all the contentments. Her beautiful soul followed me into limbo, and was present at the feast that all the patriarchs, the prophets, her father, her mother, and our dear Saint Joseph made for me. With my presence, limbo became paradise, and I could not do without letting she, who had been inseparable from me in my pains, be present at this first feast of the creatures. And her joy was so great that she had the strength to depart from my body, withdrawing and waiting for the fulfillment of my resurrection as the fulfillment of redemption. Joy sustained her in sorrow, and sorrow sustained her in joy. To one who possesses my will, neither strength, nor power, nor joy can be lacking. Rather, she has everything at her disposal. Do you not experience this within yourself when you are without me and you feel consumed? The light of the divine Fiat forms its sea. It makes you happy, and it gives you life. April 18th, 1927. The resurrection of our Lord gave to creatures the right to rise again. Difference that exists between one who operates in the divine will and one who operates outside of it. I was following the holy divine volition in the act in which he rose again from the sepulchre, glorious and triumphant. And my lovable Jesus, coming out from within my interior, told me, "My daughter, by rising again, my humanity gave to all creatures the right to rise again, not only with their souls, to glory and to eternal beatitude, but also with their bodies." Sin had taken away from creatures these rights to rise again. My humanity, by rising again, gave them back to them. It enclosed the seed of the resurrection of all, and by virtue of this seed that was enclosed within me, everyone received the good of being able to rise again from death. One who does the first act must have such virtue as to enclose within himself all the other acts that the other creatures must do, in such a way that by virtue of the first act, others may imitate him and do the same act. How much good did the resurrection of my humanity not bring, giving to all the right to rise again? Because man had withdrawn from my will, glory, happiness, honors, everything had failed for him. He had broken the link of connection, that connecting him with God gave him the rights to all the goods of his Creator. And my humanity, by rising again, connected this link of union, returning to him the rights he had lost, and giving him the virtue of rising again. All the glory, all the honor is of my humanity. Had I not risen again, no one could rise. From the first act comes the succession of acts similar to the first. See what the power of a first act is. My Queen Mamma did the first act of conceiving me. In order to be able to conceive me, eternal Word, she enclosed within herself all the acts of creatures in order to repay her Creator, so as to be able to say to him, I am the one who loves you, adores you, satisfies you for all. So, finding everyone in my Mamma, even though my conception was one, I was able to give myself to all, as life of each creature. The same for you, my daughter. As you do your first acts in my will, the other creatures receive the right to enter into it, and to repeat your acts, in order to receive the same effects. How necessary it is that even just one alone do the first act. In fact, it serves to open the door, to prepare the raw materials, to form the model, in order to give life to that act. Once the first is done, it is easier for others to imitate it. This happens also in the low world. One who is the first to form an object must work more, sacrifice himself more. He must prepare all the materials that are needed. He must make many trials. And once the first is done, not only do others acquire the right to do it, but it is easier for them to repeat it. However, all the glory is of the one who did it first, because if the first had not been done, the other acts similar to it could never have existence. Therefore, be attentive in forming your first acts, if you want the kingdom of the divine Fiat to come to reign upon earth. After this, I was fusing myself in the holy divine volition, calling all the acts of creatures, so that all might rise again in it. And my sweet Jesus told me, my daughter, what great difference passes between one act done in my will and one act, even good, done outside of it. Within the first one flows a divine life, and this life fills heaven and earth. And the act receives the value of a divine life. With the second flows an act of human life that is limited, restricted, and many times its value ends with the end of the act. And if there is any value in it, it is human value that is subject to perishing. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 21, Part 6. Fiat.